Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Wordspace Radio. My name is Billy. Joining me in the studio today is Megan.
Hello.
Ethan.
Hello.
And the very talented Lynn Bauman-Milner. How's it going?
It's going well now after you said that.
You got to start off with a compliment and everything, haven't you, mate?
I'll feel better for the rest of the day now.
That was the intention. How's things? You happy to be here?
Oh, definitely happy to be here. I've been really looking forward to this ever since Ethan mentioned it back at the Writers' Festival.
Yeah.
Was it 2 months ago now?
Yeah, I think we're in Becky Sherman's thing, and I was like,
yeah,
we need you on the podcast. So, yeah.
I was very flattered to be asked, so I'm really happy to be
we're
here.
excited for today. We've been talking about it.
Funny enough, we actually had Becky Sherman on Monday,
Yeah.
which is quite cool. So
I'm in good company then.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I don't know if you just want to jump straight into a reading. How's that?
I can do that.
Yeah, or if do you want to introduce what kind of writer you are, what kind of stuff you do, and then go ahead and read something out. How's that sound?
Sure, that'll be fine. Yeah, it's just I'm kind of all over the place with the different things that I've been writing. My short stories end up being horror stories, which is really odd. I never intended that to happen. I can't watch horror films because I end up reliving them for days afterwards. I watched the very first episode of The Walking Dead, for example, and I couldn't sleep that night because I kept thinking that half zombie was crawling up the floor to get me. And I'm like, oh crap, I can't do that. So I can't watch horror, but man, I can read it, and apparently I'm pretty good at writing it as well. So you'll have to tell me whether that's true or not. But my longer stories, things that I've been working on for the Masters, are mainly young adult fiction, fantasy mostly, and that seems to be. I seem to be a genre writer. I started off trying to write something literary, and it ends up horror, or it ends up terrible. So it's one of those things. It's like horror in a good way, or horrific because it's just really bad writing.
I think lots of people can relate to that, though. The idea of starting something with intention of it being one way, and it comes out entirely unexpected.
Yeah.
I'll do it with songs quite often. I'll try and write a rock song and wind up with a country song. I like what I've ended up with, so it's fine, but it's a little bit confusing sometimes.
It's surprising, yeah, exactly.
And then in the end I've resolved to just write country songs. So it's kind of like you've resolved to write a lot of horror. It's a similar thing, I suppose. You find what you're comfy with and roll with it, don't you?
Definitely, definitely. Right.
Are you going to start with some horror?
Yes, well, that seems to be what I've brought mainly. So this is something that I read at the open mic for the showcase for the MA that we couldn't hear because of the hen party going on.
Yeah,
yes. We tried to record that and it was just a shambles. Like, we had one camera that got pretty good picture and no audio, and one that ran out of memory halfway through. It was shocking. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I thought we'd revisit that one.
Good.
So, and this is one that shows up in the Inspiration Anthology that's coming out next month. So, a little plug there. All right, this is called In the Dark. Oh, for fuck's sake, not again. He grabbed at his brother's face, bore the boy to the ground. Gerald struggled and tried to shout, but Hank's hand covered his mouth, fingers digging into his cheeks and jawline. Hank sat on Gerald's stomach, knees pinning the boy's flailing arms. He shook Gerald's head sharply. Keep still. It won't come out cleanly unless you keep still. Gerald whimpered and ceased moving. Eyes, always the sodding eyes. Hank bent close over the boy's face, peering into his left eye. Keep it open, best you can. He stared into Gerald's eye, waiting. His breathing slowed, his attention on the hazel gold iris. He couldn't see the fear within. He didn't loosen his grip. He didn't notice that Gerald had wet himself again. He was focused, his free hand poised next to his brother's eye. He waited. A swirl of black raced across the iris, pivoting around the pupil, making it dilate, contract. The blackness moved like smoke with a purpose. It appeared to be playing, exploring its new playground. Hank didn't move, watched instead for the right moment. He started a countdown in his head. He had done this enough times to know the precise moment to strike. The smoke twirled around the pupil, switching directions, playing a spiral tag with its own tail. Soon enough, 45 Mississippis. Its amorphous shape solidified, drew in on itself. 87 Mississippis, and it became a hooded silhouette. Hank's fingers, locked around Gerald's jaw, were cramping. He knew he was close to losing his brother. 99 Mississippis, hold on, kiddo, nearly there, and his striking fingers twitched once, twice. The silhouette sprouted arms and realized then, 102 Mississippis, that it was being watched. It turned to face out, seeing what Gerald was almost seeing. Hank struck. his mind crying out 105 as it reached in and plucked the smoke from his brother's eye. His hand darted under the eye, caught the dribble of demon, and pulled the rest out. He let go of his brother's face, gave him a light slap to help bring him back round. He trapped it inside a mason jar, no holes in the lid, and sat back. The scrap of evil battered at the glass, and Hank felt more than heard the weedy shriek of indignation. "Henry Parker Jones, how many times do I have to tell you to stop hurting your little brother?" Hank was hoisted under his arms and lifted straight up. His mama swung him away, her face pure anger. "He's only little, and you're meant to protect him. Now off to your room. Go on, scat." "Yes, Mama." Hank knew better than to argue. He trudged to his room and closed the door. He had tried so many times to explain that he was helping, he was protecting Gerald. But Mama didn't believe him, didn't believe he was a demon hunter. She didn't want to see his collection neither, because it would prove nothing except that Hank's imagination was hurting her littlest boy. And she definitely would not hear one more word about angelic little Gerald being a magnet for those things. Hank opened his closet door and knelt in front of the shadowy space. He leaned in, shoved a stack of boxes to one side. He picked up the newest acquisition, held it before his face. He tapped on the glass. He knew they hated that. And grinned as the diminutive demon slapped its paws over its ears, reeling back. He placed the jar at the end of a row of 9 others, and their collective howls were loud enough to sound like a tea kettle boiling over in a house 3 doors down. He sat back and closed the door, locking the demons in the dark.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do remember you reading that one. That was super cool. Where did the inspiration for that come from then?
Back in February, I have a blog as well. I decided I was going to challenge myself to write something every day, because I'd noticed during the Masters and with the job that I was doing that I just wasn't finding any time to write anything new, and I thought this is not good enough. So February I said to myself, I know it's a short month, only 28 days, but every day before midnight I got to publish something on there. Write something, minimum 350 words. Go through it once for spelling mistakes and punctuation, and then just post it. And that's where that came from. And that kind of was, my son was heading off to bed. I'm like, drat, it's 9 o'clock. I haven't written anything. And it was that first line that came out. It was just started writing that, and then the rest of it kind of turned up from that. I think I had a brief dream as well where there was a smoke demon in my son's eye and trying to pull that out. So, yes, it came to me in a dream. But it's much better than the rest of the dream, just focusing on that one element of it.
That's fantastic.
It's crazy. It's a cool idea because it's some of the most common advice writers will give out is write something every day.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, look where you can come up with some really cool stuff if you do commit to that.
Mm-hmm. And that was came in about middle of the month or something like that when I really got into the swing of doing it. So it was something really interesting, and a lot of that there's again a lot of horror ended up on that. So
that's brilliant. It kind of reminded me of a book I read by Neil Gaiman. The ocean at the end of the way.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, you know where he gets the little worm in his
heel.
His heel,
no, I remember that. Yeah,
and I really enjoyed it. It's similar sort of vibe in narrative voice.
Okay.
Well, any comparison to Neil Gaiman.
I was going to say. I hit the holy grail. Thank you.
It was great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Why do you think it is that horror comes so naturally to you then?
I think it's just the dark spaces in the back of my head. There are a lot of them. Every once in a while I go and sort of rattle some bars and see what comes out, and there's some nasty snarlies in there. So it's a way to name it. It's a way to kind of explore them, pin them to paper, and then you're not bothered by them anymore.
Yeah.
Case in point, when I was staying in a hotel a couple of days ago, they have a place called the Safe Room. And it's like a hallway, and it's got the safe room on the doors, and you have to pass through it to get to the lift or to get to my hotel room. And there were these antique, retro, wooden safes that lined up along the wall. And the first time I go through that was like late at night, and I'm like, what in earth is in these things? And I could almost hear like the scratching of the zombies being held inside. I'm like, that's not good. And then I see where my room is. I'm like, I'm not far enough away. I've got to get a little further away. Otherwise, when the zombies rise, I'm the first to go. So I found some paper the next day and just thought, I've got to write this out, because I barely slept that night. And I thought, I've got to write this out. And once I wrote it out, I could walk through that room without a problem. Because it was imprisoning them in the paper.
Yeah, so it's a very cathartic thing, isn't it? I suppose.
It can be, yeah.
No, how weird. Did you, by any chance, bring that piece in, or was that one not one that you liked in the end?
I did bring it with me. It's still only handwritten.
Oh, fair enough. Maybe another time.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to polish that at all.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that and another thing that I wrote just to get it out of my head, just to get things gone so you can think about something else, and that's how I started writing.
It is funny because the cheesy cliche idea of writing to express a sadness is all very common with when people think about writers, but people don't often think about writing to get over a specific fear or something. That's not.
Well, there's a cartoon that's bouncing around in the media sphere now with a guy in a bookstore. And there's meet the author, and the table next to him are 3 kind of grotesque looking things. Meet his demons. That's me.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about having like little ones made up and just sat them at a table next to me.
That'd be good.
We could all dress up.
Yeah.
Cosplay.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah. I
I'm
think
down
that's
with
a great
I'm
plan.
down with that.
Yeah, I could like
Full
relive
range
my
of-
old goth days.
So long as you've got green as well. We need some green in there.
Okay, I'll dye my hair green.
Cool.
Bit of a Joker situation, maybe.
Okay. I'll supply the venom.
Right. Do you want to move on to another one? Because I understand you want to keep this short and what's the word?
Sweet.
Punchy.
Punchy.
Yeah.
Okay. This was something that got published, was it around Halloween last year, actually, in a book called Gory Bits by Kensington Gore Publishing. So it was a favour for him, somebody I met through Twitter, and he has his own kind of self-publishing publishing group. And this, I think, was what kind of... Actually, this is the one that sets Martin's teeth on edge. When I sent this in for my application to the MA, he said he had to take down all of his daughter's artwork from around the house after reading this one. So I think it might have been on the strength of this that I got into the MA. So yeah, we'll give this one a try if you like.
Brilliant. Go for it.
This one's called Ghouls Come Out to Play. Mrs. Harbert leaned over Jimmy's shoulder, staring at the paint gleaming under fluorescent lights. She cleared her throat and asked, "Jimmy, could you explain this painting?" Jimmy didn't pause from his industrious application of red paint. "This is my father, my mother, my sister, and me. I didn't put my baby brother in because he isn't here yet." Pools of red paint dribbled under the feet of each grotesque figure. Mrs. Harbert spoke, a faint wobble in her voice. "Why do they all have fangs and claws, dears?" "They're monsters." The simplicity of the response chilled her. "Are they not nice to you?" "No, miss. They're just monsters." Again, a matter-of-fact response delivered without emotion. She tried again, despite a part of her mind gibbering in fear. "If they're your family, surely you should have fangs and claws as well, not an axe." She smiled, attempting to project warmth. Jimmy did not turn to look. He knew he wouldn't be able to keep his cool if he saw Mrs. Harbert's tentacles from a kissing distance. "No, miss. I need the axe because I'm a monster hunter." He bent his head towards the painting, diligently dabbing red paint to the axe's edge. Grace Newbolt leaned onto the table, watching as this young boy, freckled complexion, blonde cowlicks everywhere, soft voice, drew careful circles all over one of the photos of his baby brother. Dr. Newbolt questioned Smith's, the investigating detective on this case, sanity, when he suggested showing the crime scene photos of the infant to Jimmy as part of her clinical assessment. She resisted, but took the photos. Over the course of the interview, Grace had noted several textbook signs of psychopathy: elevated intelligence, even for a 6-year-old, absent emotional responses, lack of empathy with others. When asked why he did not feel sad that his baby brother was dead, Jimmy had shrugged and said he was a monster. This moment led Grace to open the folder and spread the photos across the table. Livid shades of blue and red clashed with the gentle pastel curves of the juvenile interview room. Each photo documented some hideous detail of baby Ethan's death. Grace had watched Jimmy's face for some flicker of emotion, but the boy seemed carved from marble. She shuffled through the photos, selecting the coroner's full-body shot of Ethan on the post-mortem table after the death but before the actual autopsy. She wasn't sadistic. Grace slid it across the table until it rested in front of Jimmy's crossed arms. She slid a marker pen from her handbag next to the photo. "Show me." Jimmy picked up the pen and diligently marked out circles all over the picture. Grace watched with interest, noting how the circles clustered around joints. She waited until he was finished and slid the photo back to herself, spinning it to face her, and the video camera angled over her shoulder. Glancing at the large one-way mirror which dominated the room, Grace asked, "What am I looking at, Jimmy? All I see are a bunch of circles around the bruises." "The bruises are from when I tried to push the spikes back in, but they came out anyway." Jimmy spun the pen on the table. Fixated on the rotation, he didn't look up at Grace's exasperated sigh. "I'm sorry, Jimmy. You're going to have to explain. I don't see the world the way you do." Jimmy stopped the pen mid-spin. "I tried to show them, my parents, to show them the monster parts on Ethan. I wanted to trust them, but I forgot that they're monsters too, and they protect each other." His hand clenched around the marker and Grace heard his knuckles pop. "They bathed him to get rid of my marks, said I was seeing things, that I should be taking my medicine every day." He looked up at her, eyes red-rimmed with fatigue. She kept her voice soft. "Jimmy, I need you to explain." She stared at the circles that bubbled all over the photo, then blinked, trying to clear her sudden double vision. Jimmy sighed, and with the end of the marker pointed to the infant's elbows. "That's where spikes were erupting, and there," indicating the ankles, "were bone spurs, sort of like Wolverine." The pen jabbed at the neck. "Scales were growing here, and if he was anything like my mother, the subject would have a protective collar of bones." Grace stared at the photo, double vision growing worse with every moment. Jimmy's eyes were suddenly cold. "The fledgling had to die. I am sorely outnumbered as it is." Wiping at her eyes to clear the blurring, Grace glanced at Jimmy to find him still staring at her. He peered through the tousled fringe over his forehead, his eyes glinting in the harsh lights. She gawped at the blonde monster across the table and had the distinct impression she was being appraised, judged by a 6-year-old. Her heart accelerated when she realized that she didn't want to be found lacking. Not by this kid. "You're not a monster," he said. "You're the first true human I've met." Grace frowned at him, then looked down at the photo to escape the boy's eyes. She couldn't stop the gasp. In the center of each circle, bone spikes, scales, and spurs, just as Jimmy described, emerged from a haze, like an instant photo developing. Her breath came in gulps as she tried to quell the nausea rolling at the back of her throat. Judgment passed, and Jimmy smiled at her, more predator than child. "You're human, like me. You can see the monsters too." His eyes moved to the mirror, where the soundproofing failed to contain the rising chorus of roars and snarls. Jimmy circled the pen in the air between them. "Shall we show them where their monster lies?"
Wow.
It's chilling.
Yeah, very creepy. I can see why that freaked Martin out.
It's quite surreal because it was Ethan. I was like,
I forgot about that. Well, I wrote this before I met you,
Yeah.
so. Yes.
No, that was super cool though. I could see that actually being turned into quite a scary premise for a TV series or something. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
very very visual, kind of vivid story there. Awesome stuff. How did that one come about then?
That was, oh god, I can't remember. There was a competition of some kind that was looking for something. I can't remember what it was now because it didn't get very far, unfortunately. But I was just out walking. I just had this idea while I was walking of, a kid drawing a picture of him and his family with pools of blood underneath him, and he was the one carrying the axe in the picture, and I thought, what would a teacher do if they saw that? Call for a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
And that's where that came from. So just the idea, this one went through about 7 different drafts where he was just insane, or he wasn't a monster, he was something, he was a different kind of monster, and another one where she was a monster and he tried to kill her. But this was where I wanted it to go. So this was one of the first short stories that I actually spent like a month reworking and rewriting and just trying to get it just right, to pull it back from that. I didn't want it to go in that direction, and I wanted it to end up here.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first time that I actually saw how much editing can improve your writing, just to go back and revisit it and make it, no, you're going to do what I say.
Yeah. I think definitely it chose the best possible ending. It was particularly freaky because it turned out that the kid was kind of right all along, and it had a like better version of the Sixth Sense kind of vibe to it. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause
Yes. Yeah.
the Sixth Sense, obviously, the kid being able to see.
I see dead people.
Yeah, that's the one. And actually, I suppose it had a bit of a Shyamalan style twist, only not cheesy. We all hate Shyamalan,
Yes.
I'm sure.
He had some good ideas. I actually quite liked Unbreakable. I will go on record saying that.
Unbreakable was really good.
That was
And
really, really good.
Signs was quite good as well. Then it all started to go downhill. Bless him. He tried, but then The Happening happened, and oh no, have you ever seen that?
No, I don't think. Oh, wait a second. Is that the one with Nicolas Cage?
No,
Or-
that's The Wicker Man, but that's
Okay.
equally bad.
Fair enough then.
No, The Happening is
Zooey Deschanel.
Zoe Deschanel and Matt Wahlberg.
Oh,
If you like
okay.
movies that are hilarious 'cause they're crap, that's the film to watch.
Please direct all complaints to the legal department at Leeds Trinity University. Thank you.
Well, as a writer of horror, I think you'll appreciate it because you'll be able to see everywhere that he went wrong.
Well, again, like I said, I can't watch very many horror films. I mean, I was kind of watching. I know, was it The Village
Oh
with
yeah.
the cloak? So I was kind of watching it like this. Like, that's not scary. Oh, okay. A bit bored by that one. I liked it, but I was a bit kind of, when the twist came, I was like, oh
No, and it wasn't frightening, was it?
no.
Why is it though that you reckon that you can write horror and not watch it?
I think it's somebody else's vision more than anything else, because it's harder to ignore somebody else's ideas to some degree. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. You can't control the way they see something,
Yeah.
and so it's just kind of it hits more deeply when you see somebody else's vision, and it kind of clashes with what I want to see or don't want to see. A case in point would be the Harry Potter films. Yeah, everybody had a different view of what Hogwarts would look like,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And it clashed, it really jarred for a lot of people that first time seeing it. It's like, well, that's not what I saw. Not what I saw when I read it. I don't know how Rowling herself felt about it. But it's that it jars and you can't quite marry them up, or you can't reconcile it.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult to deal with. I think with somebody else's vision, because I can shut mine down to some degree, it's easier to cope with. So I can write it because I don't have to see it. I'm just kind of making it up, and I can keep the details blurred as much as I like.
Yeah, sure.
If we're watching something on TV that I know is going to be horrific, I actually take the glasses down so everything goes really blurry and I see no detail. But to watch a horror film, all that detail just comes crashing in on you, and you can't look away sometimes.
And for me as well, a lot of I could read stuff like that all day because I think it's fantastic, but problem with horror films for me at the minute, I've not watched one in a while, but like the newer ones, they're always just rely on like jump scares and sound that isn't in. You don't know whether the sound's in the film or just for the audience.
Yeah, because you can't write a jump scare, can you? Really?
No.
You can't resort to that.
Boom.
Yeah.
Capital letters.
Yeah, when horror movie makers have kind of like run out of ideas and just want to get a cheap scare out of you, they can just chuck a face in the movie.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
don't have that option really. You can't
No.
just write
It's got to be
all
that,
of a sudden
it's
bang.
because it just looks bad.
Yeah.
It looks like something that a primary school student would write. Crash, bang, wallop. It doesn't come out
I
well.
suppose you could have like a scary face on a page, so
Yeah.
you turn it over, you're like, don't realise that it was coming.
Which one is it? It's one of the. I think it's one of the Seth Green ones. They did the Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies,
Oh yeah.
and they did the Dawn of the Dreadfuls prequel to that. And now I only had that one on my Kindle, so you can't just flip through it
Yeah.
initially. So then there were actually jump scares because they had illustrations in it, and I wasn't expecting them. So flip. Ah! Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Flip. Go back just to drag. Oh no, I don't want to see that. But it can. So something like that, it can scare you in a book.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's an illustration, and you've got only like say 1,000 words to get that picture
Yeah.
across. So we're working the other way around. But you're right, jump scares just don't work. So you've got to kind of drag them in one direction, thinking, oh, no, the path that you thought was going to the left actually went to the right.
Yeah.
People don't notice that until the very end. They go, crap, how did I get here? That's really scary.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, because it definitely seems to be a trope I've noticed in horror fiction that the story always comes together at the end. It's the last few paragraphs are always the most important parts.
Yeah.
You know, do you ever write the end first?
Nope.
No?
No, like I said, I never intended on being a horror writer. It's just not what I was expecting to do. I just start writing something. Like I said, I always intend on writing something else. And then I end up with this, and it's just like, okay, so I've got this ending, and I really like it. So let's see if I can drip in the hints that will lead us to that in the rest of the story. So it's, the ending is always a surprise to me.
That's got to be more fun to write then, isn't it?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be really frustrating though. It's like, no, I didn't want it to end there, but that's really cool, but, oh, I'll just leave it now.
Oh dear. Okay, do you want to mark out a third one? Do you think we got time?
I think we've got time.
Awesome.
I'm just trying to think which would be, because I did bring a selection. Well, this is the writer. This was the one that I read at the last open mic, and you guys quite like this one as well.
Really enjoyed that.
And another plug. This is one that's going to be published in the solo publication with Indigo Dreams and Wordspace through the university. So I call this one The Writer, scarily enough. His voice rises and falls on the waves of his story, and he weaves his word spell on the audience around him. His tenor tones lure and catch each ear in range. As the story carries them along, they are fooled into thinking that they know his heart, his mind, his soul. This is just what the writer wanted, to make them believe that this is his heart on the page, that he has delivered a sliver of his soul to each one in their turn. But such is his skill that he can write so heartbreakingly well and still keep himself intact. He reads, unable to see past the bright page to the danger in the shadows. She paces the edge of the room, a descending spiral with him at the center. His imagery lights up her mind. His prose tickles a blush across her pale skin. His voice resonates within her chest, her stomach. Her body vibrates, tuned to him and the story he tells. She is entranced, drawn by his words, at last a worthy man. She weaves her own spell in return. After the happily ever after, the writer is penned in by well-wishers and wannabes, all hoping that some of his magic will rub off on them. Wide-eyed in literary awe, they lift their own words in paeans of praise, confident in the belief that they know him better now than anyone else in this room ever could. But their blind zeal makes him uncomfortable. He sips at his drink, avoids their ululations, looks and hopes for salvation from the mob. He sees her just beyond the circle of adoration. The dim-lit room casts an awkward shadow, hiding her eyes, but highlighting the curve of her smile. Another step brings her eyes back to the room, and he jolts at the ice-green sight. He stares, momentarily wordless and blessedly deaf, as the praising masses stagger to a halt in the face of his obvious neglect. He is torn between the uniqueness of her eyes and the familiarity of coming home. He dares a smile, tilts an eyebrow and his glass to her, in hopes of inviting her in. Well read. Her voice, pitched to resonate and harmonize with his, reaches inside him. His heart clenches at the sound, misses a beat, and thuds on when she laughs. He wants to see her eyes again, but she turns away, lowers her chin, drapes her midnight hair just so, and he is not allowed. He does not notice her trap, luring him to her. She does not acknowledge him again, as she makes her rounds of the crowd, but she knows where he is, what he does, and never turns to watch him. She can feel him, the vibration of him twinging through the very air, bouncing and rebounding off walls, glasses, people. She knows where he is, what he does, at every moment, but she refuses to turn to him. It's all part of the hunt. Stumbling, awkward, he makes his excuses to the gaggle of fans, extricates himself from their tarnishing repetition. Quick to escape, he is slow to approach her, palms clammy, and the glass nearly slipping from his hand. He is strong when he reads, words prepared, polished, perfect, but he finds conversation terrifying and does not know how to say hello. It can't be that easy, can it? It is her whole demeanor, posture, poise, perfection, that pulls him closer, circling the opposite path she had traced around him before. He is nervous, awkward, bashful, but has to say hello to her, this woman whose voice resonates, tripping his heart and holding his desire lightly in its tones. He drags the words from his lip, his fluent storytelling trapped in the paper of his writing. She turns, smiles. Her surprise is an act, and they both know it. Laughter, then a sudden union of minds and desire as they look into one another and read the stories there. She has turned to a different page for him to read, to hide her truth. They talk together, words entwining in the air between them, echoing their desire. Though others move towards them, drawn by the energy, they are swirled away by the same. There is no room for anyone else. They build a cozy bubble of conversation, his awkwardness relegated to a footnote. There is only entente and intent as they flirt and suggest what they think should happen next. They find themselves outside, alone with each other, surrounded by the dark and the chill of the late autumn evening. Wordless, they stare, beating hearts filling the silence between them. She trusts in his talent, waiting. He finds his words again, bold with lust, and writes her into his arms. Their lips meet, speaking this new language into each other's mouths. He presses against her, stepping forward, guiding her to rest her back against the wall. She feels the rough bricks, uneven, cold, digging in, stark contrast to the warmth of his fluent tongue around hers, his hands, his fingers tracing letters along the skin of her neck. She absorbs his touch, his words, her delight so great at his eager capitulation that she almost gets ahead of herself. Almost. He writes a new scene, and the harsh cold of the brick wall disappears. Blades of growing grass push through the mortar, covering the wall behind her, tickling behind her ears, and the backs of her bare legs below her skirt. Perception shifts, tilts, and she finds she is lying down. His weight sinks on top of her, pressing her into the grass and soft earth that molds to her body, embracing her in echoes of his embrace. The warmth of a summer sun prickles her arms encircling his neck. She dares to peek, sees a grassy meadow, a neglected picnic on a blanket just to her right. Her eyes close and she sinks into the scene, giving herself up to this new story, smiling as she kisses him deeper, urging the next part from him. His fingers trail down her arms, rewriting her into a summer dress, so he can touch her skin, write his words into her flesh. The passion flares high between them, and his words stutter, a flash of chill night, a corner of a brick in the small of her back. Then he picks up the thread again. Words blaze from his mind, his kisses, his touch sweep them both over, rolling and rolling under fresh white sheets, landing among soft pillows, tangled in the duvet, laughing without breaking away from each other's mouths. He edits out their clothes, limbs entwined skin to skin, and still the words write themselves in fire behind his eyes. They pause, eyes open and centered on each other. She reads his intentions there, and her lips quirk briefly. He does not write what came next. She rolls him onto his back, takes charge of the story of the writer, straddling and pinning him beneath her. He cannot read the changes she makes, believes himself to still be the author of this moment, scrawling his words across her thighs, her hips, her back, her breasts. She captures his hands in her own, a sweet prison around her breasts, stilling his words with her own, her mouth covering his with silence, and she sucks the words from his fluent tongue, drinking deep and stealing them for herself. And all the while she rolls her hips, demanding the climax of his story of him until he cannot withhold himself. With wordless sounds of pleasure, he pours his stories into her. No longer in control, he gives everything of himself to her. Just as she reaches her own climax, he fades and disappears. She tumbles to the bed, sated, panting, content. She pushes herself to her feet, alone in the alleyway next to the pub, the chill air of a late autumn evening goose-pimpling her skin, still warm from the touch of his words. She does not wonder where the author has gone. She will write her own stories, and what is left of him hides in the spaces between these words.
Brilliant stuff.
I suppose we should have put an NSFW on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, I think that's we didn't say that it wasn't a horror story. So some people.
Well, it's a bit creepy. It's creepy as opposed to
Yeah.
horror.
Yeah.
This one, so it's just the idea of being able to consume someone.
Yeah.
To the point of
Absolutely
nothing.
the idea, though.
No, I'm very, very glad that you read that one,
Yeah.
because I do remember it from Wordspace, and that was when we asked you to come on the show, wasn't it?
I think that was the second time
Yeah, I
that
think
we
that's
were
when we like
confirm-
decided on a date.
Definitely do
Yeah.
this, yes.
Yeah, no, because I'm really glad you chose that one because it was equally impressive the second time. Very, very cool idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us something about how you decided to write that one, or?
It was the last line, actually. What is left of him hides in the spaces between these words. Just that phrase came into my head, this idea about a guy gets picked up by a girl and he ends up rewriting the love scene. And just keeps shifting from an alleyway to, a meadow to a bed. I like that idea, and then the idea that she kind of consumes him. I initially had called it Black Widow Writer, but when I sent it to a friend of mine who gives me incredibly good feedback, he said, no, I was just waiting for the punchline, basically. It's just Black Widow Writer gave everything away too much, so this idea that she consumes her mate, and that's where she gets her stories from, that was the idea. So it was that line, that idea, and then just that image of trying to go from people being stood up leaning against a wall to suddenly lying down. How can I write that? How can I make that really clear and sensual without being suddenly he was lying on top of her without it being really ham-fisted, kind of awful purple prose.
Yeah, it's definitely a very challenging endeavour as a piece of work to try and do that without, like you say, it sounding just clunky.
Yeah,
I
50 Shades of Grey kind of.
I imagine certainly if I tried it would I'm not quite as experienced writer, and I know that if I tried to do something that experimental, it would seem quite forced. Whereas with yours, it was all very seamless from location to location, and everything just flowed.
Thank you. And again, that comes down to the editing. You got to remember that I've only been writing really intently for the last couple of years. So I mean, you can say I've been writing since I was a child, but I did take like a 30-year break in there, and I'm a lot older than I look. So I'd been writing when I was a teenager. These kind of weird, twisty little stories, are just like a little description of a friend of mine. And then I would end it with this bizarre twist, just described a girl who was absolutely beautiful and said she didn't know that she was going to be a victim of a nuclear holocaust. So but I did this a lot, and then there was this incident, and I just stopped writing. Stuff happened, and I just went, I'm just going to give this up. But I was always writing little stories in my head to make the day go faster. But I stopped actually writing things down until about 2-3 years ago now. I started writing it down again and thought, actually, this is kind of fun. I forgot how much fun this can be. It's hard work, but it makes your life so much more interesting, because suddenly you can live another life while you're writing these things. And it comes down to get the stuff down and then just go back and write it. So experiment. I mean, I never intended, I never thought I could be a horror writer, but the short stories all come out that way, and the longer stuff is, definitely for teens. This is definitely not. I wouldn't let any students that I ever taught, or working with now as a librarian, I would never let them read this. I probably won't tell them that I've done this either, because they're just a little too young, especially to hear that one.
If you like, we'll pop up a censored version. Maybe we'll do a shorter version of the podcast that cuts this bit out.
Take that one out, yeah.
So you can show, anybody who you'd rather not hear that piece.
Fair enough. That'd be cool.
Just an option.
Yeah.
Catherine will sort it.
Yeah,
Catherine's
we can keep this version for our website, and then we could give you that if you want to show it to your students.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
great.
I'm glad you decided to pick up the pen 30 years later, for sure.
Yay. I'm glad I did too. Like I said, it's made life just much more interesting. Because as you know, I was a teacher beforehand, and then life just kind of collapsed around my ears, and I was signed off work for anxiety, depression, and thought, I gotta do something, because I spent the next month asleep, and this was no way to live. I didn't want to feel that anxiety, I didn't want to feel that stress, but neither did I want to fall asleep and stay asleep. I don't want to sleepwalk through my life, so I picked up the pen and started writing, and haven't looked back. So I'm just glad that I came to
It is weird how,
university to do this.
in some sort of a way, creativity and that kind of mental despair are kind of close cousins sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And, you'll find often that it's, not what we mentioned already, that it's so cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, just writing for the sake of writing is a much more rewarding feeling than writing for any type of purpose.
Yeah.
So I suppose it came back to you at the right time.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and now even though you're doing it for something of a job, kind of,
Aiming that way, yes.
as long as you can hold on to the idea that it's writing for the sake of writing first, you know, that's what makes it.
It's writing for the words and the joy of telling a story, I think is what it comes down to. You tell the story that you want to tell. Everybody's got something, some interesting way of seeing the world, and you know, you guys seem to enjoy this rather skewed way I see the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The way I see it, it's kind of a case of, you know, just write whatever it is that you love writing, and if you love it, high likelihood someone else is going to love it too.
Yes, yeah,
you
exactly.
know, you're not going to be the only one,
Yeah.
so, you know, go for it in your own way, kind of thing. It's got
Excellent.
dark in here.
Where did the sun go? We'll write it back into existence. She wrote the sun back into the sky. Damn it, didn't work.
Nice try, though.
Yeah, that was just terrible. I'll have to edit that.
Alright, we have hit the 40 minutes point. If you want to do another one, we've got all the time in the world. Or if you want to save it for the next podcast.
I think we'll save it for another podcast.
Awesome
We
stuff.
would love to have you back on.
Oh, that'll be brilliant to be back on.
So
Yeah.
do you,
You can come on any time,
Yeah.
yeah?
yeah, definitely.
Ah.
We
Yay!
want you back.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
So do you have anything to plug?
Plug, of
There you
course. Yes. Well,
Plug away.
plug away. Wordspace imprint through the Masters of Creative Writing degree here at Leeds Trinity University. We have to put that in there. In conjunction with Indigo Dreams Publishing, we're doing. I don't have a date yet, which is really annoying. I would have loved to have had a firm launch date, but the anthology called Inspiration: A Space for Words is coming out in June, and that is a collection of writing from everyone that has any kind of association really with LTU. So we've got master's students in there, we've got undergraduate students in there, people from not just the English or creative writing departments, but from across the university, as well as published writers, published poets, established writers, and visiting guests for the Wordspace open mic. So it's a really, really lovely mix of different things. And that was part of my project, actually, for writing as a profession with the master's degree. I worked on that with John Gledhill. There you go, John, plugged you. Excuse me. And so really, really looking forward to that coming out next month.
Us too.
So
Yeah, I'll definitely be
I'm getting there.
grabbing a copy of that, I think.
excellent. And I'm sure you can, track us all down and get signed copies too. So
Oh, that'd be good. You could get someone to sign under each one.
yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be a good idea for charity giveaway. Actually, for charity raffle, we can get all the authors to sign underneath, and then we've got.
Yeah, that's not bad. Roll with that. I like that. That's a good idea.
The other thing that I'll plug now is I've got to announce it again. I don't have a firm date or anything like that, but I've just found out that I'll be published as well. My collection of short stories will be published with Indigo Dreams and Wordspace imprint here in August, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. So really happy about that. And the writer will be, I believe, will be one of the pieces in that as well. So we're working with Martin professionally. He's going to be my editor. I'm really looking forward to working with him on a professional level as well as my tutor as well.
We'll have to get you back on for that, and
Definitely.
let us know where we can get copies of that.
I will bring in copies. If it's out, I will bring in copies for you guys. So
Make sure you message us as well when you know all the dates and everything. We'll
then you
put them
can-
in the video and the annotations and
fantastic.
details down so that people
Yeah.
can click stuff and buy books and all that lovely stuff.
Yay. Okay. I can
All
do that.
right.
Great.
It's been awesome having you on the show.
And it's been absolutely wonderful being here. Thank you so much for asking me. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for coming
It's neat. I can say I have fans. I've never been able to say something like that before, so I'm really happy about
Hopefully
that.
this gets you even more fans.
Exactly. Excellent.